I've really enjoyed the people that I've met in the space. A lot of really smart people, a lot of really motivated people, people who come from a wide variety of backgrounds. But yeah, it is pretty funny to kind of like meet someone who you've only kind of like seen as their avatar for sure.
I would love to learn more about like how you grew up and how you got to where you are today. I've listened to your past podcast episodes. It sounds like you were really entrepreneurial. You were starting companies with the Figma founder, and it sounds like you have been like doing this all along.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, so I studied computer science in college, and I didn't really start a company with the Figma founder, but we worked on a project together. Dylan's a good friend of mine, and that was a lot of fun. And I guess sort of, yeah, it definitely kind of kicked off the like idea of doing my own thing. But yeah, it was a very gradual path to doing entrepreneurship. I didn't have this like you know early idea that I was gonna start my own companies from an early age or by any means. But eventually, I just got more and more interested in it as I got like more of a taste of things. So yeah, so after college, I worked at Pinterest for a bit and learned about growing a consumer tech startup, which was really fun and interesting for me. And then I left Pinterest to start a company in the personal finance space that was very quickly acquired by Credit Karma, and worked there as an engineering manager for a while. Also kind of interested in this like general consumer tech area. And that was really the time I'd followed, Bitcoin and Ethereum peripherally before, but 2017 was really the time when it felt like this movement was getting to a much larger scale. And that was what drove me into the crypto space. And then, as I always like to say, like NFTs were exciting because they were the first kind of not pure financial or non-pure tech play in crypto, where it really felt like this was a mainstream consumer type application of the technology. And that was just really like interesting and fun. And so it was enough to sort of lead my co-founder and I to build a company around it.
I'm curious, like, were you always like really confident about like this starting a company journey? Because when I was browsing your like LinkedIn, I saw that like you tried to start another company. Try to start like I think the site or like vision company, like the other app. So and then like I don't know what happened to that company, right? Like I'm curious, like when you're creating a company, I feel like you have to be really believing in it, and then you have to like constantly convince yourself I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm just curious, like, where does those like kind of energy coming from? And then it sounds like, you went to a great school. I'm curious, like, were your parents really supportive in your like entrepreneurial journey, or like, were they kind of concerned? Like, what was that like in terms of like starting a company from a personal level?
Sure. Well, so it sounds like maybe two questions. I can answer the second one first. My parents have always been really supportive of me. I've been lucky to have an amazing family. Actually, my sister is doing a startup as well. And yeah, my parents have always been supportive of kind of whatever I want to do, as long as it is something that I'm excited about and makes me happy. So that's been a really great like foundation to have. In terms of kind of like, it's an interesting question around expectations and sort of, you know, the like belief and conviction around startups. I think, um, a large, I guess the first thing I'll say is like a large component of it is sort of being in the right place, the right time, in the right
Mhm.
market. And, some of the previous things I worked on, I didn't sort of, did not have that combination of factors. Whereas I think
Mhm.
OpenSea, luckily enough, has a lot of those really nice ingredients.
Mhm.
But I will say that I think the most important thing for me has always been kind of not having too many expectations around what's going to happen. So,
Mhm.
and really following your curiosity and doing things because you enjoy them in the moment and you're excited
Mhm.
about it in the moment versus sort of having this expectation that you're going to build a giant company with lots of people. So it was actually really funny. It was a very interesting moment. Now at OpenSea we're 40 people, and
Mhm,
I never sort of pictured myself like having a 40-person company. It's not that I thought I wouldn't have a
mhm,
40-person company. It's just that I didn't like think that much about that.
mhm,
Um, it was more that like, I really saw OpenSea as this fun, interesting project, and
mhm,
it certainly had the potential to become a giant company, but I was excited about working on it regardless, right? Even if it, didn't, within reason, right?
mhm,
You have to listen to the market and sort of go where, you make sure you're building something that, someone wants, right?
mhm.
But uh, yeah, I didn't sort of approach it with it from the angle of like, oh, I need this to be like a giant, successful, big company. I
Mhm.
more approached it from the angle of like, oh, this is really fun and interesting, and I'm sort of excited about it regardless.
Yeah. Okay. So this is maybe personal, but I'm curious, like, is your family like entrepreneurial? Like, because when I interview a lot of really successful founders, I found that like a lot of their parents are entrepreneurs. So I'm just curious, like, is that the case for you?
No, my parents are not super entrepreneurial. My mom is a doctor. She's retired now. And then my dad develops educational software, but
Mhm.
it's not exactly like a tech startup.
Hmm.
So yeah, neither of them are.
When it comes to like creating a company and when it comes to, as you mentioned, like OpenSea is like a unexpected, right now it's like unexpected big. Throughout this journey, like who do you bounce off your career advice? I mean, career journey with? Like, I mean, like for example, when do you quit Pinterest? When do you start another company? When do you do all of these things? Like who do you kind of chat with?
Yeah, well, in the past, sometimes it was like it was no one, right? I just kind of like, did these things. So I think when I left Credit Karma to
Mhm,
do YC and start a company, I don't think I asked anyone. I
mhm,
just was like, seems like a good idea. I'm just gonna do it. Other times, I don't recommend that. But I'm so it's something that I've sort of been improving is getting more and
mhm,
more advice from thoughtful people. Now with OpenSea, like when we make strategic decisions, I'm constantly like bouncing off ideas off of people that I trust within reason, right? You don't want
mhm,
to sort of live your life by like a giant consensus of all of the people you know. But for
mhm,
example, Dylan Field, the founder of Figma, is a
mhm,
really helpful mentor of mine. He's sort of a few uh, a bit further along in his journey than I am, and so having people like that who I can talk to and kind of learn from all of the things that they've done, and any mistakes that they've made has been extremely helpful. But I do
mhm,
think also sometimes it just comes down to kind of what you want
mhm.
to do, and that's not always the case that someone. I think there's a little bit of a risk of kind of over relying on feedback or over relying on kind of advice.
I'm curious, like there's two part, right? Like one part is like you're saying like you have great peer mentors, right? Like the Figma founder or something. I'm curious, like how do you build these kind of relationships? Because I know that they invest in you guys, but before you get on that part of like letting someone invest in you, like how do you kind of get the relationship going? Because I think a lot of the founders that are maybe like overseas or like something, I feel like people don't necessarily have the right network. How do they build one? I think that's like one part of the question. And the other part is like it sounds like you also have really great like intrinsic motivation as well as you built like a great filter system for yourself in terms of doing like career decisions. What are some information that you have to, shape how you think about these things?
So it sounds like two questions again. I'll start with the
Mhm,
first one. So I think the question was how to build relationships. My advice there would be, uh, I think smart people who are successful and kind of ahead
mhm,
of you in some ways love people who are curious and people who want to learn and
mhm,
people who don't sort of want to like talk necessarily at them but want to like have
mhm,
a two-way conversation.
mhm,
So I think my advice would be seek out like the people you want to learn from
mhm,
and just be very curious and very intellectually honest and like you know um, have sort of conversations that someone of that level would be excited to have, right? So I would recommend that. And then also sort of starting early, right? Whatever job you're working in, I think there's lots of opportunities to meet people, meet smart engineers and smart business people, like kind of at your current job. And I honestly wish I had done more of that early on. So the earlier you can start, the better. And then I didn't quite understand the second question. It was something around kind of how to process information.
I guess it's more like what kind of information diet do you have to kind of
Oh,
educate yourself? It could also be how do you educate yourself on like NFT, or because NFT, it's even to a normal person, even now, it's like still really, really new. But obviously, you have seen a couple years ahead, and then you went to like these meetups about it years ago, right? Like this is just absolutely not obvious for most people. Like, how do you kind of, yeah, like what kind of information do you consume
yeah.
to kind of like be
Well, I'll
educated?
answer the question actually like rewinding back to 2017 when I was first getting into crypto, because I think it's actually relevant for people who are now getting into crypto. I think
Mhm,
a big thing for me back then was, and it's a little trickier these days, but it's starting to be, more of a thing, is going to meetups,
mhm,
and really just like, I think you can leapfrog
mhm,
significantly by talking to the people who have already gotten the depth of knowledge that you're looking to acquire, and just
mhm,
asking lots of questions and getting them to point you in the right direction. I
mhm,
think it's like, and it depends on like sort of how well you like curate your Twitter feed and like
mhm,
the articles and things that you read. But I actually think it's like, there's so much information about crypto out there
mhm,
that like trying to navigate Twitter and newsletters. There's definitely some really good curated ones, but sometimes it can be challenging to like get to the interesting stuff, especially if you're super busy. And so I actually found that like getting a human being on the other side to just like answer your questions about
mhm,
stuff and point you to the right stuff
mhm,
can be really helpful. And then you supplement that with like
mhm,
the reading and like reading Twitter and stuff. These days, this type of stuff is, I don't spend like a ton of time um,
mhm,
doing that, because most of my work is sort of like more heads down on company building. But I think that was like very useful early on. And then at the same time, it sort of accomplishes multiple things, right? Because you also develop your network while you're doing that. So I think,
mhm,
you know, physical meetups are maybe a sort of underrated hack
mhm.
that I think is worth checking out.
I totally agree. I feel like, as I mentioned, like previously last week, I purchased my first like NFT, and I feel like I was completely like I had to ask a friend like physically, not physically, but
Yeah.
like on the phone to be like walk me through how to use MetaMask, or like how do I purchase something, how do I like make sure my OpenSea wallet receive the NFT, and like I feel like those are just so interesting. Like you have to have a human to walk you through it, through the journey, to make you feel like, I guess, like more confident. I'm curious, like, what is one skill that you're constantly trying to get better at? Would it be, it could be like technical skill, like coding, or like it could be soft skill, like sales, because back in time you were engineering manager and now you're a CEO. What are some skill that you're kind of trying to get better at?
Yeah, I think one is like decisiveness.
Mhm,
So, I think I'll sort of find myself getting caught in these scenarios
mhm,
where like, it's not clear what the right decision is, and
mhm,
there's merits on both sides, and there's maybe some sort of FOMO associated with one decision.
mhm,
And yeah, so I think like getting better, getting more comfortable in those scenarios that, I might make the wrong decision, but moving on and kind of, using my mental energy in more productive use cases than just like sort of belaboring a decision, is one. And then also like sort of similarly kind of focus, right? Like,
mhm,
you know, sort of being more comfortable with not doing a lot of things, and making decisions that cut off opportunities with the
mhm,
knowledge that that's just sort of part of uh, life and part of company building.
mhm,
So that's kind of that's one area. And then the other one is sort of being a better leader and um, you know inspiring people to uh, really, kind of take full ownership over pieces of the company, which I think is actually, by virtue of just being in a really exciting space at a really exciting time with a really amazing team of people, has happened quite naturally. But I think, there's a lot I have to learn on like how to, just be a more effective leader and a more effective manager who really empowers the people in the company to do the right thing. And then lastly, sort of, yeah, maybe this is a little bit of the first point, but yeah, figuring out what are the like most important things we need to be focusing on and solving those problems, right? I think it's like, very tempting to kind of see your list of things to do and go for the easiest ones first. But that often is not, the thing that will have the lasting impact on the company. Often you want to actually spend a lot of effort on things that are really hard because they're, existential threats to the company or what have you.
I'm like, I really like what you said about like making decisions, like the, trying to be less indecisive, because I feel like business decisions are hard, right? It has like real like monetary consequences. In terms of like building up your team and building up your product, when you first started your company, like what was I heard that like I heard from your past interviews, like basically back in time when you guys first applied to YC, it was a completely different idea. I'm curious, like how did you find the idea of OpenSea? Was it like super obvious and then you guys went all in? And like what were some challenges at the beginning? Because I can basically predict it was potentially like people don't really know what's NFT until maybe like early on, well, later last year, the Clubhouse thing happened. So I'm curious, like, what were some challenges that you were facing while building this platform in the beginning?
Yeah, so we sort of came across this idea because CryptoKitties was one of the first NFTs. There were actually some NFTs before it, but it was kind of the one that went big on building an actual application, an actual game. And we were like, oh, this is really cool. We joined a lot of the Discords and started seeing like what were people doing with these things, what other things were people building outside of CryptoKitties. It's clear that like there were sort of rumors that new NFT projects might come online, and it was just very interesting to us that you could have sort of for the first time, assuming there would be more NFTs, you could have this eBay style experience. But instead of physical stuff, you're actually buying and selling digital stuff. And that was just like a very cool concept to us. The problem was there weren't a lot of NFTs to trade, right? It was just CryptoKitties. And so when we were first starting, it was really like kind of a scramble to get NFTs listed on our platforms because it was just CryptoKitties. There was like Decentraland, but they hadn't launched their NFTs yet. There was like Ether Tulips, but they were kind of like, I mean, they're fine, but like it's kind of random. And so we were just like kind of hoping for new projects to launch. But fortunately, yeah, like over time, it didn't happen all at once, but more projects started launching. And like, a lot of the exciting thing was a lot of those projects would launch, but they didn't have like a marketplace to buy and sell them. And so that really like, gave us this feeling that there was something here. But of course, it's very early and the people who were using these things were kind of the early adopter type folks. But if you were working in the space, you kind of witnessed that there was a ton of early momentum around the community of builders that was growing. So that was really what kind of kept us going, was that we saw a lot of excitement and an interest from these people. So we kept on going.
So when you guys started, like who was your first hire? Assuming like, and also like, how do you pick your co-founder?
My co-founder and I worked together on a bunch of different projects. So we like were sort of both exploring crypto at the same time. And so it was sort of a natural thing to come together and work on this. And applying to YC sort of gave us a push in that direction. In terms of first hires, the first hires we made, we actually acquired another company called Atomic Bazaar, which was a similar like platform, but instead of buying and selling with Ether, you actually swapped assets. You would do like trading a CryptoKitty for another CryptoKitty.
Mhm.
And so the two folks, only one of which is still with the company, we we're working on that project, and we're great fits from sort of a like alignment and excitement perspective.
When you first started like coming out with your like strategy to launch this platform, like what were something that you've done early on to kind of either acquire the audience, or did you have to like convince people to create NFT first, or did you have to basically DM all the potential artists to be like, hey, we have this platform exists? What were something that you've done at the beginning to get this thing started?
Yeah, not we didn't do much of that. So so it was more being the only website that let you do this early on. So anytime a new project launched, people would want to resell the items, right? And so there was another company that was competing with us, but we were a little like more focused on this particular thing than they were.
Mhm.
And so we just sort of we made sure that we kind of build the features that people wanted, and like we're active in the communities, and like when people had issues we would always try to respond to them as quickly as possible. And that sort of led to being the kind of default place where people would list stuff.
Mhm.
And a lot of this was happening through Discord at the time, where
Mhm.
there were these Discord communities around games, and it still happens this way too, but like, and people would post links, and so they'd sort of spread that way, right? Very, very organically. And now Twitter is another area where people are, constantly kind of showing off their NFTs on Twitter. Um, so yeah, it was really like it was not. We didn't do a lot of growth hacking. There were a few things we did, like we created Discord bots that would automatically
Mhm.
sort of like post the sale,
Mhm.
but I honestly don't know how much of an impact that had. The main sort of strategy was just like being very early, supporting all of the projects, and then trying to provide as strong of a product and as strong of customer support as we could.
When it comes to like creating a strong product, in your opinion, like what is a strong product? And in terms of like hiring people that can build the product, how did you kind of shape up your team?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think a strong product is one that really does the job that the user wants to accomplish, right?
Mhm.
And also is the product that people will talk about in a positive way, right? So, and I think there are examples of products that I use, Notion, for example, where I just am so excited about like the features and functionality that it has, and I just think it works so well that I'll go and tell my friends about it and be like, you really should use this, right? In the case of OpenSea, it's a little bit different. Um, it's not sort of spreading because it's sort of like in the Notion way, but it's more like, oh, this really serves this purpose, and this is the place where people are coming to buy and sell, and this is the easiest place to kind of come and explore NFTs. And so I would say that OpenSea sort of has this really strong fit with the market and the job to be done, which is like buying and selling. But I think we still have a ways to go in terms of improving the like customer happiness and
Mhm.
the enjoyment that you get from it, because right now I do think it's just such a new space that there are a lot of like very rough edges to the product and using crypto as a whole.
Now you guys already like successfully raised like a lot of money. How do you plan on like leveraging the capital to build out your platform? Obviously, OpenSea, I feel like it's a definitely like the leading. How do you envision yourself build out more add-on functions on top of the platform? Or do you feel like you want to grow the audience first, like to educate the market, and like basically would you spend the majority of the budget on like marketing, or do you think you would primarily focusing on like building more functions on top of the existing platform?
Yeah, the latter. We're really focused on building the best possible customer experience right
Mhm,
now because despite the extreme growth over the last
mhm,
6 months, it is actually really early days for the space.
mhm.
We're really just getting started, and there's a lot of improvements that we need to make to the core customer experience before we can go and really go after like you know, taking this to billions of people, right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, we're focused on that first. But then, eventually, I do think that NFTs are what's exciting about them is their technology that, in Web3 more generally, is something that I do think like the entire world will eventually experience.
When it comes to like picking the NFT to purchase, I heard from my friends basically you really need to pick the best community. You see like what people are talking about over Twitter. Curious, like how do you pick the best NFT projects to look at? And then since I guess like a non-NFT expert, like how do you start?
Yeah, well, I think a good starting place is the OpenSea rankings page. It
Mhm,
allows you to kind of see what NFTs are trending,
mhm,
figure out what are the top volume NFTs, sort by various metrics. So I think, just kind of digging in and seeing what's happening, following various Twitter accounts and joining all the Discords and learning about these things. There's not sort of one entry point, but I do think that there's a lot of material out there online to kind of help you get started. And it depends on what you're excited about, right? If you're excited about gaming use cases like Decentraland or CryptoVoxels, which I personally am, um, then that's one area to dig deeper into. If you're more excited about art and that side of things, then there's so much to dig into there. So yeah, I think really just kind of checking out our rankings page and going from there is a good place to start.
What do you think is like the psychology behind people purchasing an NFT for, I guess like for some people, I feel like it's like because of their joining a community. And then for some people, it's like they're collecting a piece of like modern art. What do you think is like a psychology behind why people purchasing these things?
Yeah, I think it depends, right? So yeah, in some cases it's collecting a piece of art. In other cases, it's like buying an item to use inside of a game. In other cases, could be buying an event ticket to go to an event. I think NFTs are so broad that there doesn't need to be kind of one reason that someone buys something. And I do think it's interesting. Probably the most interesting reason these days is sort of the cultural movements around
Mhm,
NFTs, right? So there was CryptoPunks, which has this very interesting like community of people who are just extremely passionate,
mhm,
and that has trickled down to other projects like the Board Ape Yacht Club,
mhm.
where there's a similarly interesting community that is putting these as their profile pictures on Twitter. So that's a really interesting one to me. It's like people basically buying these art pieces, but it's more around like being part of a tribe of people. And yeah, I think um, you know that's sort of the motivation there is kind of the sense of belonging or the sense of status associated with these things.
I guess like when like the crypto punk or like the board ape yacht club started, why do you think they were more successful compared to a lot of like other projects on the platform?
Well, CryptoPunks was the first project, so I think that has really been their claim to fame. They're the
Mhm,
oldest project, and they've been around the longest. Bored Ape Yacht Club, yeah, it's an interesting one. It was sort of the first of these like not CryptoPunk derivatives, but sort of who knows exactly why. I think sometimes like a some
mhm.
person in the community gets really excited about it and they tell other people, and then those people get excited, and I think there's a little bit of kind of randomness or like, marketing. Yeah, I don't know. You probably don't want to call them marketing since they're not actually trying to, um, go and market directly. But there's, I think just sort of a group of people that get excited about these things and then sort of it memes itself into existence. So I think that's kind of what happened with Board Ape Yacht Club.
Because of celebrities are picking up this board ape yacht club, I feel like even more than like CryptoPunk, because like let's say like Stephen Curry or someone that they all started like purchasing NFT around this project. I'm curious, like, how do you think this, I guess, like this trend would go? Like, do you feel like, I guess, like it's like as a platform, as like a leading platform, what are some action that you would take to make sure I guess, like the momentum being keep like, going upward?
Well, yeah, I think we're less concerned about kind of the short-term upwards momentum. We're more excited about long-term momentum, right? So
Mhm.
all of the things we do at OpenSea are we really build for the long-term time horizon. So um, right now projects can come and go, and people are really excited about NFTs, and we'll see whether that kind of continues to go up. And I think it's quite possible it does. But even if it doesn't, we're actually not like super worried. I think this is a very strong long-term trend. And it's a completely like new paradigm for the internet that I think as long as we keep focused on building the features that customers want and improve the product, then we'll be well positioned. And I would rather sort of make sure that we're doing right by our customers than try to sort of layer on short-term growth hacks.
I think like one of the really interesting things when I first used OpenSea was like you guys didn't really build a wallet on your own. I'm curious why is that? Because if I were a founder in this space, I would have make sure that I build I guess like a money related things on my own platform. I'm curious, but like you guys seems like partnering with MetaMask and like other wallets, and like curious why is that? And how do you figure out like what's a feature that you have to be the top leading like platform in the space?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've always been as collaborative as possible with the space. Like, we don't want to build everything. We just want to build kind of the best marketplace. And if there's additional features we need to add to achieve that, then we will. But in general, we try to avoid like building things that other teams are already building really effectively. And I think the wallet space is an example of that. There's lots of great wallet options out there. As much as people kind of hate on MetaMask, I actually think it's a really powerful tool and a really important piece of the ecosystem. So yeah, like we definitely bias towards not building everything, to be honest.
Mhm.
But um, if there are things that we need to do to make the user experience better, then we certainly will do them.
How do you kind of like research the space, or like how do you know what function to build for your own platform?
Yeah, we're very engaged with our customers on various channels. So
Mhm.
on Discord, on Twitter, our head of product is constantly, talking to our customers on Twitter and learning about, what we can do better and trying to improve. And so we have this really nice real-time feedback cycle with our customers. And then of course we also look at kind of like what are people struggling with on the site, or like what are the support tickets that are coming in that are causing a lot of user pain, and try to fix those as well.
So in terms of like listening to customers and like as a CEO, I'm curious, like how do you spend your time? Do you spend your, since you mentioned like the head of product would do these like a lot of like one-on-one consumer feedback listening, and as a CEO, like how do you structure your day to lead the company?
Yeah, so I do like to or a lot of my days are spent recruiting. So
Mhm.
we're rapidly expanding the team. We went from $1 million in transaction volume to over $3.4 billion in transaction volume last
Mhm.
month over the course of 12 months. So
Mhm.
really rapid growth curve with a team that started out with like 7 or 8 people, right? So we've been playing catch up on the company's building
Mhm.
side. Um, so that's been a big part of my time. And then the other piece is getting involved in certain areas of the product where I feel like I can have big impact. So for example, like a while back we decided that we wanted to be a cross-chain marketplace that wouldn't just serve
Mhm.
Ethereum. And so there was a big effort around re-architecting a lot of the marketplace to support new blockchains. So
Mhm.
that was a big undertaking that I was very involved in. So yeah, it's sort of a combination of things.
When it comes to like recruiting for your company, like what is the company made of? For example, what's a DNA? Is that like half engineering talents and then the other half people that are like sales or marketing? Like how would you shape your company?
Yeah, it's roughly half engineering and then a decently sized customer support team,
Mhm.
product design, operations, legal, business development.
When it comes to like I guess like shaping, I guess like when it comes to shape how you who you hire, do you kind of like in your head, do you picture like the function or strategy first and then like hire based on that? Or are you more like who are the top talents in this market? We're gonna hire whoever that is good.
A combination of both. Yeah, we definitely opportunistically hire some folks that we think could move around within the organization. But then on the other hand, we certainly also are looking to hire certain specific roles. So it kind of depends on the function, but we don't have like a one size fits all solution there.
In terms of like when you hire these people, like do you like what kind of things do you look for? Is that more like are they able to get along with the team, or is that more like because of they're so talented at a specific category of things, and like when you first encounter them, were they from your net existing network or were they from just like people kind of like apply?
Both, right? So yeah, we've definitely hired people through my network, through network of people that work at the company. And then, we've gotten a lot of really strong inbound applications recently, especially as the NFT space continues to grow and be more and more exciting. In terms of how we evaluate people, yeah, we look for people who will really add to our culture. So not just fit in
Mhm.
with our culture, but also like add something new, right? That I think is something that is a little bit overlooked sometimes at companies is they look for the culture fit. But you really want, you don't necessarily want someone who's like going to fit in perfectly. You want someone who's going to add something that you'd like to see in your company and that you aspire to achieve. Um, so that's one of the most important things we look for, in addition to just sort of, is this someone that uh, is extremely talented and extremely able to kind of jump in and solve the problems that we have at OpenSea.
And when it comes to like NFT related projects, I like, or like when it comes to, I guess, like, do you guys pick what kind of projects goes on to the platform, or do you guys like just take anybody who wants to create a collection on top of the platform?
So yeah, you can create a collection for free, and it's a totally open platform. But we do curate the collections based on whether there's we don't allow fraudulent content on our site,
Mhm.
copyrighted content, these sorts of things. So it's open to begin with, but if there's anything that is problematic, we'll take it down from the site.
Have you guys like actually meet all of these creators like real life, or like have you guys like chatted with the top creators, or like how do you kind of like understand why people are, I guess, what make a successful launch? And then like in terms of like the top ranking on the website, is that based on how many people purchase that particular project, or is that because of like, or is that ranked by how many people click on the project?
That's ranked by the amount of transaction volume. Yeah. So it's basically, if you buy or sell something on OpenSea, it contributes that amount of dollars to the volume. And yeah, in terms of creators, yeah, we have met a lot of creators and users of our platform in person. It's really exciting to kind of put faces to names. But yeah.
Wait, so were they like, because like on Twitter or on like the digital platforms or on Discord, like I feel like I never seen who is who, as like everybody's profile picture is an
Yeah.
ape, or for you it's like a cat. So I'm curious, what was that experience like actually meeting the people behind it?
It was fun. Yeah. Like it's always interesting, right? Everyone's really, I've really enjoyed the people that I've met in the space. A lot of really smart people, a lot of really motivated people, people who come from a wide variety of backgrounds. But yeah, it is pretty funny to kind of like meet someone who you've only kind of like seen as their avatar for sure.
How did you guys meet each other? Was it like through Twitter DMs, or like did you guys like throw events to meet like the top creators meet each other, or like How did that happen?
Yeah, a combination of events, Twitter DMs, conferences, those sorts of things.
What is like the top conference in the space?
One that's really exciting is NFT NYC, which is coming up in October. So that'll be a pretty big one where a lot of people are planning it.
When it comes to like raising funding, obviously you guys has been like extremely successful at it. Did you guys face any challenges at the beginning as like NFT wasn't necessarily like the hottest thing as it is now?
Sure, yeah. In the beginning, I think, especially for venture capitalists outside of crypto, there was a lot more overhead to kind of learning about NFTs, and not everyone was convinced that it would be a big thing. So it was a little more challenging. I wouldn't say that we had as challenging of a time as some kind of consumer tech startups that you might be familiar with. I think Pinterest, for example, it's like known for having a really tough time fundraising, but then obviously being a very successful company. So yeah, like it's a lot more challenging back then. Now it's a little more simple because there's so much general excitement in the space.
When I saw your resume, you work at Pinterest and Flipboard. They're both they're not NFTs, but like they're more like also picture driven sites. I don't know if Flipboard considers like a picture driven site, but like Pinterest certainly is a picture driven site. What did that experience taught you that like you kind of use in your current role as a CEO for OpenSea?
Yeah, I think like Pinterest was a really interesting experience. Well, one, it just taught me sort of the basics of like growing a consumer website. So optimizing, A/B testing, looking at different growth channels, all of those things. And then, I think Pinterest was an interesting one because, and I wasn't like heavily involved in the high level strategy here, but I do think that were many different interesting directions the website could have gone, right? One direction is you imagine it being sort of like the next generation of Twitter, where like you're displaying your interests and you're able to follow specific interests and these are things. But turns out that's probably more like what Reddit has become. And Pinterest is more of like, sort of I don't want to say a niche audience because it's a really large audience, but it is sort of really useful for specific things that are very visual in nature. And so I do think it's interesting to see that Pinterest has, been more specifically focused on that use case. And it'll be interesting to see like kind of how it expands.
When it comes to like picking a core strategy for the team, as you mentioned, like Pinterest could go on like the Twitter or Reddit route on like picking a specific interest. Why did Pinterest stay as like what it is today? And then like, how did you guys kind of test out these idea and then recognize it wasn't the right way to go?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I joined the company when it was like 200 people. I was just an engineer, so I wasn't involved in like, this type of strategy. But, my understanding is like Pinterest sort of tried to kind of get to be more of a social network, but it's not what people were doing on it, right? They were sort of just using it to discover things, and so they sort of had to lean in what was working, right?
When it comes to like picking the mission for OpenSea, what are you guys trying to do down the line? Is like, are you trying to capture all the transaction towards not transaction, but like everything become the biggest marketplaces of NFT? What is your vision for this? And what are some other projects be said basically selling like really cool pictures of like apes? What kind of other projects do you imagine could be sold on the platform?
Yeah, I think for us, we're trying to build the best possible NFT marketplace. And so we really want to be a foundational layer for all sorts of different projects to emerge, right? It's really hard to predict exactly what's going to be the most popular, but as long as you build kind of the right infrastructure underneath it, then you can power all of these experiments and, play a really key role in the ecosystem. So that's been our strategy, is build like a very broad horizontal platform that can work for all sorts of things, and then sort of see what emerges on top of that.
When it comes to like testing for your own platform, do you do like a beta testing to like your core users, or like how do you kind of figure out what you should build next?
Yeah, we often do beta testing with our users. We talk to users. We have some passionate community members that we work with to try out new things. And then internally, we'll do a lot of testing. So yeah, it's sort of a combination of all of the above.
What is like the next thing that you're excited about? Like, I guess like launching or some things that you can talk about, right? Like, I don't want to like.
Yeah. Well, we've been really excited about our Polygon launch. We have launched
Mhm.
we launched it a little ways back, but we've been consistently improving our support there, and it provides a really unique trading experience where you don't have to worry about gas costs. You can trade things around at much lower prices. So we're really excited about kind of allowing users to experience that over time. And then, of course, we're working on just better on ramping to OpenSea, so allowing people to purchase things for the first time if they don't have cryptocurrency, and some other features on the pipeline further along.
As you mentioned, like you were trying to help, like I guess like the second thing you mentioned is like helping people who never purchase like cryptocurrencies to purchase an NFT. I mean, like what kind of function do you think you have to build to kind of like meet that needs? I think that sounds really interesting, as well as like, the no gas fee, of course, it's like something huge.
Yeah, I think like, well, there's a bunch of different hurdles for people right now, right?
Mhm,
One is obtaining cryptocurrency, the other is getting a wallet.
mhm,
And so we're addressing those one by one. So we currently do allow people to buy cryptocurrency through a third-party provider on the site, and we'll be making that more streamlined and more of an easy flow over time. And then the wallet side is something that we're still exploring, but there's
mhm.
probably things we can do to make the wallet setup process a little bit easier as well.
In terms of like, like having um MetaMask or like other kind of like wallet onto your platform, do you have to do business development with them, or do you just list them as like one of your partners on top of your platform? How did those kind of like, I guess, business partnerships start happening?
Yeah, I think a lot of our business partnerships have been people reaching out to us who are excited about the NFT space and us kind of helping them
Mhm,
understand and handholding and telling them how to use our platform. Yeah, we've been fortunate to work with some really awesome partners, Golden State Warriors, Reddit, Rob Gronkowski, just tons of different people who are like getting
mhm.
getting involved and interested in the space. So most of them have been people who just hear about NFTs and hear about OpenSea and want to dip their toes, and we're really excited about kind of helping them get on board.
So did everybody start approaching you guys recently, or like do you have to do any kind of like outbound sales like at the beginning?
No outbound sales.
Just all inbound. I think that's amazing.
Sure.
It seems like you pick the best market. So when it comes to onboarding people with zero experience in the NFT space, like I think you wrote a NFT Bible. What kind of information do you recommend for people to consume before they kind of like try to purchase their first NFT?
Yeah, I think the NFT Bible is a great starting place. There's tons of newsletters now. There's Zima Red, it's a great newsletter, Bankless, following some of the major Twitter accounts. We now have some tutorials on YouTube that you can check out that I think are pretty interesting. So yeah, there's tons of resources out there, and I think OpenSea is a pretty good starting place for people who are new.
Like if they want to check out one particular NFT project, like what do you recommend?
I would recommend CryptoVoxels. So CryptoVoxels is a virtual world where you can explore, and there's NFT museums, and there's just you own the land inside of the world. It's really cool, and I think it's a picture of kind of like a more futuristic version of
Mhm.
NFTs. Whereas with the collectible projects, they're super interesting and fun, but this is one that like I think is just like kind of taking it to the next level. Decentraland is similar, but yeah, that's one I would definitely check out.
I have like a 1 minute fire round for you.
Sure.
So first question, what's your favorite book?
Homo Deus,
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
maybe Elon Musk,
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
maybe my parents.
Who is like your business crush? Like who do you look up in business?
We'll go with Ben, the Pinterest CEO,
Where can we find you outside of work?
going for a run.
Awesome. Well, Devin, thank you so much for coming onto the show
Yeah,
today.
thanks so much for having me.